It has been hot outside. It's hard enough to walk when it's this hot or bike, let alone run a marathon, although that is exactly what David McGuire is doing. The Vancouver area man is running multiple marathons across Canada to raise awareness for brain injuries. Tomorrow he'll start another 26.2-mile, 42-kilometer trek from Pickering. And David joins us by phone, taking a well-deserved break this morning. David, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
I'm good. How have you been managing running marathons in this heat?
It hasn't been that bad. I take lots of breaks, and I do things like run with a freezer bag on my head and things like that, right? So, yeah, and lots of water.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say over 42 kilometers, it must be a pretty heavy. You must have a block of ice on your head for something like that.
Well, I got a motorhome and a CRV behind me, so about every hour I'll sort of take off the freezer bag and replace it with another one, and yeah.
Very smart. Now, you've been doing this cross-country. Why did you get the idea to run the marathons from coast to coast?
I guess the idea came from I wanted to do something after my brain injury to sort of really get the word out there about brain injury, especially preventable brain injury, and I was yelling and screaming and no one was listening, and I thought, well, what could I do to sort of get people's attention? And Brain Trust Canada was on the same board as me, and we sort of worked it out that maybe one of the ways to do it would be run across the country and literally stop at all the schools, all the brain injury associations, and reach out to as many people as we could.
So tell us about your brain injury. What happened to you?
Well, my brain injury was a little bit unique. The simplest terms, I had a stroke or a brain bleed. We do know now that my brain had been bleeding for a considerable period of time, and I was on long-term disability, but nobody had decided to check my brain. I finally had a major stroke, and that caused me to go to the hospital. When they took my skull off, they realized there was a lot of dried blood in my skull, so it had apparently been bleeding for quite a while.
And then what happened? Like how? I mean, you. Part of it was when that happened to you in the hospital. They told you might never walk again, right?
Well, they didn't tell me. I was in a coma.
Okay. Yeah, that can cause problems for communication.
Yeah,
yes.
And but they did tell my family and stuff, and it was I heard about it secondhand, but it was basically they were all sitting there, they'd just been called that your son's in the hospital, and they're sitting there, and the doctor goes, so we need to remove his skull, and they're like, and what happens if we don't? Oh, he'll die. Oh, okay, well, yeah, go ahead, let's remove that skull. And so they did, and they put it in liquid nitrogen for 29 days, which I think is really cool. I mean, one of my favorite things when I was first waking up was I had an exposed skull. The skin was still there, and I had half a head of hair and a little bit of a vegetable, but I thought it was just so cool that I could touch my brain. And, my now wife was just like, yeah, no, don't do that.
Well,
and yeah, so and I had to have somebody there with me because my brain had actually swollen, so it was pushing out, and there was nothing there, no skull to protect it. So I had to have a worker there with me or a nurse with me 24 hours a day to make sure when I slept I didn't roll over and roll onto my skull. Right?
So how did you get from there to being able to run a marathon at all?
Wow, great question. Me and my doctor figure we can make $1 million if we can figure out which part of the brain
came back,
got damaged, right? Yeah. It was the big thing for me was frustration. I had to learn how to walk and talk all over again. I had to learn some basic skills, and I was unable to be employed or do anything. For a first year to 2 years, I was almost homebound, and I had to move back in with my parents who had retired pretty much, but were still out during the day. And I had nothing to do all day long, and I just sort of thought, well, if I couldn't play video games, I couldn't do anything, so I was basically just sitting in a room doing nothing all day. I couldn't read because I forget what I just read, so I'm reading the same chapter, the same page over and over again. And I was really limited. One of the things that I was very lucky to have was my physical abilities. And they had a gym in their little condo, and I would go down to the gym, and I just started working out and running. And they had a straight straight out and back little place. It was in Tawasin, where there's a straight ferry terminal going straight back. If you've ever been to the ferry, it's straight out and back. And I just started running, and I would write down every day how much I ran, and I'd forget. And I came to visit my sister in Toronto, and she's looking at my little book of all my notes. And she's like, dude, you run more than I do. And I'm like, oh, okay, because I forget, right? I have no memory now, so I would completely forget that I had run, and it just added up. And before I knew it, I was running like marathon distance, and it was just, total secondhand, like it was just, I don't know, it was weird. I really don't know.
Your sense of humor is clearly part of your abilities to get back from all of this. I just want to ask you one last question, because you were doing this to raise awareness. Why?
Absolutely.
It's called the silent epidemic. Why is that?
Well, I knew nothing about brain injury before it happened to me, and I learned the stats obviously afterwards. And, when you think about it, there's 175,000 people in Canada will get a brain injury this year alone. And if you look at the stats purely for alone, you got to remember a concussion is a brain injury. A stroke is a brain injury. Blunt force trauma to the head is a brain injury. When you add all those up, there are more people with a brain injury than will have cancer, will have diabetes, will have all other disorders combined in North America, yet you'll never hear anything about it. And that was one of the frustrations for me, was the lack of resources out there. And once I realized how many people were stuck by it, it kills families, right? I'm a different guy than I was before. So you lose the friends, you lose who are you. What makes you you goes away. And I just thought there was something wrong with that. And the more I looked into it, and the more I found the majority of brain injuries were actually preventable, and if it's something as simple as putting on a helmet and somebody doesn't have to go through what I went through or what my family went through, it just to me seemed a no-brainer for you just not to put on a helmet, right?
Yes, a no-brainer. Another one there.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, David, best of luck and enjoy the run today, and thank you very much.
Oh, cheers, guys.